Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Neuroalchemy, the Brain Body Healing Podcast. This is the space where science meets soul, where we slow conversations down enough to understand what's happening inside the human system, and where healing is explored as a multidimensional journey. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Young. I'm a doctor of integrative and natural medicine. And much of my work centers on helping people reconnect the dots between their brain, body, and experience, as well as their nervous system, emotional experience, and identity. One of the intentions of this podcast is to create clarity, because when things feel complex or overwhelming, clarity can create safety. And when the nervous system feels safe, it becomes easier to access insight, choices, and meaningful change. Today, we're exploring something deeply hopeful. The idea that your brain is not fixed, that your patterns are not permanent, and that you are actively participating in how your future self is being wired. Take a breath, everyone, because you're not finished. Your story is still unfolding. Today, I'm joined by Beatriz Martinez, a licensed psychotherapist with over 30 years of experience and co-founder of a community mental health center serving South Florida since 2001. After decades working in crisis-based mental health care, Beatriz began asking a powerful question. What if we could teach emotional resilience before people reach a breaking point? And that question became the foundation of her work in prevention-based mental health and her Triumph Steps framework, which focuses on emotional regulation, brain plasticity, and identity reconstruction. Beatriz, welcome. We are so glad to have you here on Neuroalchemy.
I am so happy to be here. What a beautiful and thorough introduction. That is really awesome. Thank you for having me here.
Before we begin, I always like to begin with just a gentle arrival check-in. How are you showing up today, whether physically, emotionally, or energetically, as we step into this conversation?
All in, it's Friday. It's almost time for me to get in the car and drive to one of my favorite places on earth, which is Key Largo. So I am very full of energy and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you for sharing that. And to everyone out there, just a reminder that however you're showing up today is enough. Take a breath and relax as we enter the space together. Before we move deeper, I'd love to slow it down and ground out a few terms to orient our listeners. One of the things that we do is define concepts in a way that feel accessible and tangible and hopefully actionable as well. So I'd love to start with neuroplasticity. Beatriz, when we say neuroplasticity, what does that mean for someone in everyday life?
Sarah, neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change, basically. Plasticity, right? It's like it's plastic, it's moldable, it changes. And we teach people that every thought we think and every reaction that we're repeating, it really strengthens certain neural pathways. So the brain is not fixed, which is a really awesome thing. 50 years ago, if we would have been having this conversation, we would have thought that our brain was fixed, right? But there is enough research out there now that is teaching us that it is not fixed, that it's adaptable, which means we're not stuck. We can literally shape how we respond to life.
Absolutely. And you also shared a powerful phrase that we're participants in our own future wiring. What are you inviting people to understand with that?
So future wiring. Imagine, that brain is plastic. We are basically telling it with those thoughts and actions where we want to go. So when we think of future wiring, it's the idea that we consistently think, feel, and practice today, whatever we're thinking of, it's wiring the brain for tomorrow. So I often say that our past does not define our future. Our future is designed with the thoughts of today. And I love to teach that to my clients and to the people I train in my framework. The future is not built someday. It's being built right now with the small repetition of thoughts and actions that we have right now. So the emotional patterns would rehearse. I always teach also that before we feel, we're thinking, right? So thoughts cause feelings, feelings cause actions, and those actions cause results. And so if we pay attention to the results we're having in our lives and we go back to the thoughts gave us these results. And if we're wanting different results in our future, then we better begin to look at what we're thinking today.
Absolutely. So many people live their life in a position of life is happening to them when really it's happening for you, but you also, it's so empowering when you learn that every thought you think and everything that you're choosing into in every moment, it's choice. You're not stuck. None of us are stuck. And another key concept in your work is emotional regulation and even happiness are skills. Can you help us understand the difference between a personality trait and a trainable skill?
So one of my phrases that I use, I think, in every single one of my presentations is happiness is a skill that can be learned, right? So therefore, we can actually learn emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is a skill. It's not a personality trait. And yes, we have personality traits, and people say, oh, but I'm Italian, I'm Colombian, I'm just tempered. This is just me. Yes, you may have that, but if you're willing to change and you are committed to have a better version of yourself, then they are trainable skills, and emotional regulation is one of them. So that is, it starts with noticing. I tell people, hey, just notice what you're noticing, right? Like right up here, like begin notice what you're noticing in your thoughts. Because then after you do that, after we have more awareness of it, then we're going to create, like I said, a different feeling. And then our actions are going to be different and our results are going to be different. So it requires a lot of awareness, basically, with that emotional regulation.
Everything begins with awareness, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that willingness, right? That decision of us making that, okay, now I'm aware, but I'm making a decision now to do things differently. I want to have different results, so I would need to do them different.
You spent decades working in community mental health, often seeing people when they were the most overwhelmed. What led you to shift your focus from crisis intervention to prevention?
So my friends say that I want to take myself out of business, and I would love to take myself out of business, right? We have been with Healthy Connections, our community mental health center, for the past 25 years. This year will be 25 years. And about 10 years ago, I just felt like we needed to do more. I felt like there was more to do. The one-on-one was just not going to cut it, right? It was not going, and even though we had back then about 25, 30 clinicians working with us, it's still the one-on-one was not going to make it. And so I just had this inspiration to create an emotional literacy program to teach children how to be happy. Again, happiness is a skill that can be learned. They're ABCs to happiness. And if we taught them early on, just as a class, just like we teach math or language arts, if we taught it in a classroom to children, the ABCs of happiness, then they would have the emotional regulation that we're talking about, and they would not have to end up knocking on our doors later in life, right? We all have situations that happen in life, but if we have the skills to manage them, then we would be much better off. So I started to really not focus so much on the people that were coming into my center, but wanted to be, reach a lot bigger audiences. And that's basically how Triumph Steps was born.
One of the things that I see clinically is that many people aren't necessarily lacking awareness, but they understand what's happening, but there's often a missing bridge between what you were just saying a moment ago in terms of between awareness and change. And that bridge is usually the structure and the repetition that you're describing. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So we begin, yes, it's like, okay, you're aware. Now, the most important and powerful thing we can do is decision, right? That decision to say, okay, I really want to change. And once we have that decision, then they are committing to come in and see any of us in our clinic for a minimum of 12 weeks. I always tell people we don't do any more of these one-on-one sessions because nobody's going to be able to transform, not even in 12 sessions, but at least if we have those 12 sessions are going to happen in 90 days, right? Because it's usually once a week that we're going to see them. And I tell them, if you improve, even if it's 1% per day that you're making improvement, if you're really sticking to the plan, if you're really sticking to the skills and, the map, the roadmap that we're giving you, and you make a 1% improvement in 90 days, it will be noticeable, right? That if they just come in for 1 or 2 sessions and they make 2% improvement, they're like, oh no, this thing is not working. I'm just going to give up on this, right? So their commitment needs to be for solid 12 weeks. After that, it doesn't mean you're transformed, but after that, we have ignited something in them and the possibility of change, right? And I always teach them that improvement never goes on a straight line, right? It has the up and downs and the up and downs, and they're okay. In the downs, we're learning. And so all that, it's a normal process of improvement. And we just stick with it. After 90 days, they will definitely see it and begin, to see some neural pathways forming, and then they're happy and they're stick with the program.
Many people believe they'll feel better once life becomes easier, but your work is suggesting something different. How do thoughts influence the body on a physiological level?
So I teach everyone. I do a lot of psychoeducational in my coaching, right? And I teach them. I had a phrase when my daughter was very young that I used to tell her, thoughts become things, keep them beautiful. And every time I would drop her off at school, when she was very, very young, I would say, hey, Sophie, remember thoughts become things, keep them beautiful. And the lesson I wanted to give her with that phrase is thought things in our bodies first, right? Thoughts become things in our body because depending on our thoughts, our body releases different neurochemicals. So if we're having happy, enthusiastic thoughts, our body is producing serotonin, dopamine, oxytocin, really happy neurochemicals. And if it's the opposite, then it's producing all sorts of stressful hormones, right? So it produces lots of different neurochemicals. And if we begin to teach people, hey, our thoughts are producing different things in our body, and depending on that, we go back to the lesson, right? We feel something and then we act differently. And that's basically how we are creating the different results in our body and in our lives outside of us, right? And those results, I always can tell people, we can put them in 4 main domains, right? The results are either in relationships, and that includes husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, friends, co-workers, health and well-being, and that includes physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, vocation, and then time and financial freedom. Those could be summarized in the results that we have in life. And we always have, if we assess those 4 domains, there is always one that we want to make better, right? We should always be growing and expanding and improving our lives in all senses. But there is always one that we really want to improve the more. So that's where we begin.
Let's talk a little bit about what happens in the nervous system when fear is dominating both our attention and our experience.
So when fear comes, a lot of cortisol shooting up right in our body. And what happens with that is we get ourselves into the survival mode. That's basically what's happening with fear. We get into survival mode. We're not regulating our emotions. The energy is all going into that. So we're not able to problem solve, which is what gets us out of that moment. And we teach them simple things that people go like, what? But as breathing, right? Let's practice breathing in those moments of fear. And we teach them what a diaphragmatic breathing is. People like, I know how to breathe. I'm breathing, I've been breathing since I was born. No, most of us do not know how to breathe when those moments show up, right? So when we're filled with fear, we don't know how is it that we take a deep breath that goes into our stomach. How is it that the exhale should always be slower than the inhale? So we teach them that we have, all of us without an exception in the whole planet, have that tool that we can get a hold of in those moments of fears. And the moment we get our fear situated, then we're able to act differently. And I have one of, one of my big lessons in the whole process is about fear. It's helping people understand that fear disguises itself in a lot of different ways and with a lot of different messages, right? So it disguises itself with procrastination. It disguises itself with us feeling like a victim. It disguises itself with brilliant excuses. Brilliant. And the excuses are so brilliant that we believe them. And that's why we stop ourselves from, moving forward. So once we begin to dismantle those disguises and really see them as disguises, then we're able to talk to that fear and kind of befriend that fear, right? Say, hey, 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 I get you now. This is what you're telling me. This is how you're telling it to me, right? You're not worthy. You're not good enough. You're going to be spending too much money on that. This is whatever ways you're talking to me. I get you now, and I can say, okay, I hear you, but not today, fear. Today, I'm not going to pay attention to your messages.
And how can intentional thought patterns begin shifting that internal state?
So we begin teaching clients the very specific. So we identify, we help them see their blind spots, right? We come up with their fears, and then we help them come up with very specific new messages that they can say when that fear shows up. So instead of I'm not good enough or I'm not intelligent, they're going to have the set of messages that we come up with. Yes, I am worthy. I can do this. I am creative. I'm intelligent. We're going to come up with those messages that with repetition and consistency, we begin to change those deep grounded beliefs of us, right? Of not able to do something. So those self-defeating paradigms begin to change with this set of messages. And we teach them how to use those messages, because people often say, what do you mean I'm going to say intelligent when I don't feel intelligent, right? Or yeah, I'm intelligent, I'm going to become intelligent. So I explain to them what really makes affirmations of those statements work. And there's very simple steps that will make them work. And one of them is, first and foremost, you have to say them, right? You definitely have to say them. And if you say them right at the beginning of the day, when you're still kind of waking up, or right before you go to sleep, when the subconscious mind is taking control over the next 5, 6, 7 hours you will be sleeping, it's very powerful. So you say them right at the beginning of the night and right at the end, at the beginning of the day, right at the end of the day. Then you emotionalize that. And how do I emotionalize saying I'm intelligent when I don't feel intelligent? You imagine how you would feel like if you were intelligent. Just imagine, how would it feel like for you if you felt confident already? So imagine, visualize, like feel it, right? So that's emotionalize it. And then you go and you act as if. So I love acronyms, and for that one I teach it with SEA. You say them first thing in the morning and before you go to sleep. E, you emotionalize it. You imagine how it would feel like. And then A, you go and act as if you're already intelligent or confident or loving or patient with your child, whatever it is that you're working on, right? And little by little, that acting as if becomes easier and easier. And then all of a sudden, you have embodied this new version of yourself and this vision that you had, which is really, really awesome.
That's exactly the word that kept coming up from inside of me as you were talking. She's talking about embodiment, and that's exactly what you said in the end, that embodiment. Absolutely. And from a neuroscience perspective, thoughts aren't neutral, right? They create chemical responses. So the way we think repeatedly becomes the environment that the nervous system lives in.
Absolutely. That's absolutely what it is.
You speak about identity reconstruction, especially after adversity. When someone's sense of self is disrupted, what happens psychologically?
So our body like absorbs those moments, right? The trauma, the pain. So identity reconstruction is the process of consciously redefine who you have become, right? So this is my identity, and if I want to do some reconstruction, again, we go back to that awareness, right? We consciously have to say, I really need to change this. And again, we can go to that phrase that I said earlier, our past does not define our future. Our future now is designed by the thoughts of today. So many of us are living from identities formed in childhood or shaped with, a really traumatic experience. But identity, again, is not fixed. Just like we talked about the neural pathways. And so if our identity is not serving us, and we realize that it's not serving us, then when we begin acting in alignment with who we want to become, the brain begins to support that new version of us. But again, it goes back to you have to want it, you have to make a commitment, and you have to make a decision. And little by little, like everything, when we go to the gym and we want to build some muscles, or you don't go to the gym one time and then you come out with the body that you want, right? Same thing is going to happen with our brain. I call this the hygiene of the mind. I love calling it when I'm teaching it to children and young adults and teenagers. I love using the term hygiene of the mind, right? And I ask them, did you brush your teeth today? Did you take a shower today? Most of them say yes. Or yesterday, yes. How many times, right? So that's the hygiene. You don't do something for 30, you don't brush your teeth for 30 days and then the rest of the year you don't brush your teeth, right? You brush your teeth every single day, a few times a day. And we should do exactly the same thing with these new tools that they're gathering. And the practice needs to be like the hygiene of their teeth or their body.
So I think what you're saying is this new identity is in many ways, it's shaped by visualization and repetition.
It is shaped by, first, I asked them to do an exercise, and I asked them to get into like a time machine. I relax them. I make them feel very comfortable. We do the breathing that we know that it's going to get them to be in that place where the inner wisdom begins to speak with them, right? We all have dreams and we have desires that we're so busy sometimes we don't listen to. So we get them to that place, and then I ask them to get on a time machine and go fast to March 27, 2027, March 27, 2028, and then land in March 27, 2029. And if everything would have worked out beautifully in those four domains that we talked about, or the one domain that they want to work on, how would that life look like? Tell me how exactly. And I asked them, it's not how you think your life is going to be 3 years from now. No. The question is, How would you love your life to look 3 years from now in that area, right? Because then the questions we ask are very important here. It's not how you think it, no, how would you love it? Then they get in touch with that beautiful version. And then we begin to say, okay, now, if that's the vision, what's one step you can take today that will put you closer in the direction of your dreams? And then we begin to break it down into very manageable little steps that get them there.
Embodiment followed by reverse engineering to figure out exactly what each individual needs. That's so beautiful. You know, what's fascinating is that the brain doesn't even fully distinguish between that imagined experience, right, and the lived experience. So when people begin rehearsing that future version of themselves, they're already activating those neural pathways.
And that is so true. And the way I make that a fact so people really understand when I'm doing classes with them or, training my coaches is I do the lemon exercise. So I relax them. I ask them to imagine that they're in their kitchen and then they found this very juicy lemon. I put a picture of a juicy lemon in my presentation. And then I ask them to imagine they're in the kitchen and they slice that lemon in half and they bring it to their mouth and then squeeze it and put a little bit of salt and squeeze it. And then I ask them, do you salivate? And most people say yes. So that's exactly what you're saying. Our brain doesn't know what's real and what's not. Just imagining that you have that juicy lemon with salt in your mouth, you salivate. So this is something that clearly explains to people the importance of us imagining ourselves in that beautiful version of ourselves, because that's how the brain begins to understand and see the possibilities and the steps that we need to take to move forward.
Let's circle back to that idea that we're not prisoners of our past wiring. What role do repeated thoughts play in shaping identity? And then how do small daily patterns rewire the future?
It's all connected with the same thing, right? So thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, actions lead to results. So how are we doing this? Being very conscious at all times that I'm rewiring my thinking. I'm creating new thinking habits because this is how my future is going to be designed. So it's just putting all that into perspective and being very conscious throughout the day with everything that we're doing. Basically, in front of us, that little, the cause of our results formula. Thoughts lead to feelings, feelings lead to actions, actions lead to results in these 4 domains. And let me go back. What do I have control over? My thoughts, right? I can choose what I think. And there's sometimes people say, oh my God, when I have trauma, I just come. Yes, absolutely comes to you. But you can choose how long you want to entertain those thoughts. When I used to work in substance abuse, they would always use that phrase. You can choose how long you want to entertain those thoughts, right? Yes, it may come, all of a sudden these things may come and we have no control over that. But we do have control over how long we're going to entertain those thoughts, how quickly I'm going to substitute to the thoughts that make me feel better, more hopeful. And then, I begin to have that identity reconstruction, right? What is it that I really want? Do I want to stay on the victim mode or do I want to be designing that beautiful life ahead of me? And that's how it's done.
You describe peace as something internal rather than circumstantial.
I'm sorry, you describe what?
Peace as something internal rather than circumstantial. How does someone begin to cultivate that idea, that embodiment, when life feels chaotic?
It's all with those choices, right? And when life feels chaotic, we're in that survival mode. So making that simple choice that we talked about, let me breathe. Let me breathe through this. Let me begin to see what are the thought substitution I can do here. But first and foremost, let's breathe, right? And I ask a lot of my clients actually where they are in terms of spirituality. And That is a very big tool that I use because most human beings actually feel there is something greater than ourselves that help us, that help us. So if we are having a relationship with that, bigger thing of, than us, that creator, then they really do not feel alone. And the pathway to recovery is much faster. Now, when they say, no, but I don't believe in that, I always tell them, do you believe you have an inner wisdom? Is there an inner wisdom? Is there like a GPS? Is there something that and we all feel that, yes, that we do have an inner wisdom, an inner guiding light, that when we get a hold of it, that when we connect with it, we are able to get ourselves out of whatever it is, whatever traumatic event or whatever situation, chaotic event we may be going through. So that is another tool that I really help my clients get in touch with. And that's one step on its own, which is basically silence, the power to create all things. And in that silence, we're getting in touch either with the creator that's going to guide us and help us, or with that inner wisdom that we all possess that's going to guide us and help us out of the situation.
It's so important that we do include that, right? Because who we are at the core is a spiritual being, right? Having that human experience. So I love that you also make that part of what you're doing. What are some common myths about happiness that you would want to challenge?
Well, I tell people, people are big into saying, what do you mean? You're either born that way. And yes, we all are born differently, right? We were all born with a little bag of gifts and a little bag of challenges, right? And our purpose is to, get a hold of those gifts and really, really nourish them, make them bigger. And with our little bag of challenges, we need to do the same. We need to see them, we need to see what they are, and we need to walk through, a lot of these challenges. So happiness, a lot of people say, well, you're just born that way. You're either born with it or not. It's either comes with you easily or not. And the reality is that that is true. However, that doesn't mean that we cannot change it, right? And when we worked a lot with addictions, we would say that yes, there are some people that come with the tendency to become addicts, right? To really use a lot. And there are some other people that don't have that issue. They can have a few drinks on a weekend and then that's it. And there are other people, no, they say that one is too many and 1,000 is never enough, right? That once they have that one, it's just too many already. So yes, happiness, it's the same way, but that does not mean that we have the capacity within each of us to be able to take the steps that we need to take and be actively working, having a different result in terms of happiness.
We always end our conversations with what we call a micro practice invitation. Not a big protocol, not perfection, but something like a small, meaningful practice that listeners can explore throughout the week. Beatrice, what's one simple practice you would like to invite our listeners to try to work with over the next week?
Okay, so you already saw that I like acronyms, right? See, say, emotionalize, act as if. I use a lot GLAD to end our day with a GLAD list. And GLAD G stands for something we take for granted that we should be grateful for. L, something that we learn that we should be grateful for. A, something that we achieved that we should be grateful for. And D, something that delighted you today that you should be grateful for. So at the end of the day, I invite all your listeners not to visit your to-do list for tomorrow or all the things that you did not accomplish today that you're kicking yourself for not having done them. I'm asking them to really look at a glad list. Remember, the subconscious mind is going to take over. So go over those 4 things and use it as thinking as a mental hygiene. So like, just like you wouldn't go to sleep without brushing your teeth, why would you go to sleep without clearing and directing your mind? Because here is, what most people don't realize. The last thoughts you think before you fall asleep become the material your subconscious mind works on all night long. So while your body goes to rest, your mind is rehearsing, right? So if you fall asleep in stress, in worry, in your to-do list, in what I didn't do today, and what this person told me today, and I got me so frustrated and so upset, we don't go there, then when you intentionally end your day with gratitude, awareness, and acknowledgement, you begin to train your brain to look for what's working. And this is a big one, because in those 90 days, when I ask people to commit to some of the exercises, this is a big one for me, because we want to make sure they either listen to some of the audios that we give them to listen to, that I created actually with very CBT messages. We ask them to listen to that, and also end with the glad list. This is how you rewire your baseline.
And remember that small awareness shifts do begin creating those new neural patterns, so never underestimate the power of a small shift. Before we close, I have another question. If someone listening today is feeling stuck in old patterns or unsure if, change is possible, what do you most hope that they remember about themselves?
I want them to understand that regardless of the external circumstances, we can gather tools that when we gather them and we practice them, we can get ourselves out of it. So you are not alone. There's tons of people out there that could really help you direct your life, clean your mind, direct your focus, and begin to let your subconscious work for you and not against you, right? So with these tools, it's it's just the consistency that will make us get where we want to go to.
Beatrice, thank you for this conversation. What you've shared is both grounded and empowering. That change is not just about insight, but it's about structure, and it's about repetition, and it is about recognizing that we are actively participating in who we are becoming. And to everyone out there listening, thank you for being here. If this conversation resonated with you, please consider sharing it or subscribing to this podcast. That's how these conversations reach the people who may need to hear them the most. I'm Dr. Sarah Young, and this is Neuroalchemy. Until next time, remember this: you are not broken. You are becoming. Bye for now.